Of all the Republicans at CPAC, who won the straw poll? This man, Ron Paul.
But then another presidential candidate stepped to the podium and said, forget about it.
I like Ron Paul. I think he's a good guy. But honestly, he has just zero chance of getting elected. You have to win an election.
Zero chance is what they say.
Can't get much worse than that.
Well, what do you... Of course, if he wins the Republican nomination, then he'll get to debate President Obama. What would that be like? To give us an idea, the president has graciously agreed to debate Ron Paul tonight on this show. Please welcome President Obama. All right, I will play the role of moderator here. Congressman Paul is a big advocate of free markets. What's your problem with free markets?
John, look. Now, I believe in the power of the free market. But a free market was never meant to be a free license to take whatever you can get. Now, that's what caused the recent crisis, and that's why we need more regulation.
More regulation, Congressman?
Yes, we need more regulations on the politicians and on the bureaucrats. That's where the regulations should be. The people should be left alone.
But seriously, lack of regulation caused the crisis?
No, I think the idea that the government was over-regulating, everybody felt like the government would take care of them and that housing bubbles could last forever and there was a moral hazard to it. If you have a free market, there's plenty of regulations. The regulations are that if you don't do a good job and you don't serve the consumers don't buy the products and they go bankrupt and they go out of business. That's a pretty strong regulation. Regulation, follow up your contracts. If you break your contract, you're in big trouble. If you hurt the environment, you're in big trouble because you're violating somebody else's property. So there's a lot of very strict regulations in a free market economy.
Mr. President, you say it's government that brings us innovation?
Well, listen. Now, government needs to invest in our future. Half a century ago, when the Soviets beat us into space with the satellite called Sputnik, NASA didn't exist. But after investing in better research and education, a wave of innovation created millions of new jobs.
Congressman Paul, that sounds good.
Yes, but he makes the assumption it wouldn't have happened unless government did this. They say that, and quite frankly, there would probably be more funds for innovation than if the government uses the innovations and passes out the funds for political reasons. The funds would be spent in the marketplace by supply and demand, reward the success, and punish the inefficient. That would be much better than with the government doing it.
Mr. President?
Well, let me be clear. Now, the government has to lead. Now, take transportation. We must invest in mass transit. And my goal is to give 80% of Americans access to high-speed rail.
Ooh, that sounds good.
It sure does sound good, and maybe if the government got out of the way, we would have high-speed transportation. We've had government involved in transportation for a long, long time.
But doesn't government need to spend the money to jumpstart the stuff?
But they don't have any money, and I don't like the idea. They might have good goals, but they don't recognize the fact in order to get the money, they have to steal it from somebody. And they steal it from productive resources, or they just print it out of thin air and making our problems that much worse.
Congressman Paul, what's your solution to the budget crisis?
Quit spending money. Across the board.
And there have been some Republican plans. Mr. President, what's your response?
Well, you know, the budget cuts proposed on your side of the aisle, they bankrupt America's future. Now we're talking about a 70% cut to clean energy, 25% cut in education, and cuts in the college Pell Grants. Now, these are the kinds of cuts that tell us we can't afford the America that we believe in.
That is for sure. We can't afford government spending money on these things because the government is flat out broke and they've bankrupted our country. So if we had less government and let the people produce, we're not producers anymore. Productive jobs have gone overseas and all we have is debt. And then to argue that we need more money for Pell Grants, well, we don't have any money. There's no more people to steal it from and you just can't keep printing the money. So sure, it's a great idea to have Pell Grants and all these wonderful things, but the the real truth is that you have less of it if you depend on the government to do it, and you should depend on free people taking care of themselves, and you would see so much more prosperity, so much better education, so much better transportation.
You say there's no more money to steal from people, but you say we could eliminate the deficit if we just tax rich people like me.
Absolutely. Now, I just think that the most fortunate among us can afford to pay a little more. Now, I don't need another tax cut. Warren Buffett doesn't need another tax cut. You don't need another tax cut. And, you know, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I could pay more. We wealthy people could pay more. Can't we cover all this stuff?
No, it wouldn't even come close. It would be peanuts compared to what you need. But I'll tell you one thing I would go along with. You know, those liberal Democrats, you know, they like to tax and stick it to the rich and say if we just tax the rich, we're going to solve all our problems. You know, the one thing I would concede, if you're rich and you're in the military-industrial complex and you're into corporatism and you live off the taxpayer and you're making a lot of money, like some of the companies that have gotten bailed out, they're back making money again. Why should the taxpayer support these corporations that liberal Democrats and a lot of conservatives support? We shouldn't allow them to rip us off. We shouldn't even give them the money. But in the meantime, I guess I wouldn't resist the fact that if somebody's made all their profits off the taxpayers, I'd tax them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, and Mr. President, who's really actor Reggie Brown. But most of his words tonight were direct quotes from the real Barack Obama. When we come back, your questions for Congressman Ron Paul.